was going to not mention this at all, but this week I had a wisdom tooth removed on this side, and it really is uncomfortable. and it's funny, like I have the other three I still have, just the one that is gone, and I find that when I walk I veer to the left. No, that doesn't happen. That doesn't happen. But I was, in the middle of the week, I was really hoping that, I was so looking forward to today, and I still am. The last few messages that I've been putting together, they've come with a lot of reflection and a lot of reminiscing through the years of, like really over the last 20 plus years, really, like here and Fort St. John, where he'd been and so forth. And so I was looking forward to, and that's, a lot of that is sort of based, is going to come out here this morning too, and I've been looking forward to it. And so here we roll. And I want to start off with a question first, is that, has there anyone here, have any one of you ever met somebody famous before? Yeah? Someone famous, someone that you would regard as famous. Anyone? No one? Okay, he's pretty famous around these parts. And if you want to see more pictures of that, you can find that if you're like Cheryl's Facebook, it is filled with lots of fun things in there. There's always something there. And he always has that kind of a look on there. It's kind of like he knows that there's going to be, it's incriminating. He knows it. But when I mean about meeting somebody famous, I'm meaning like, well, okay, someone of you, Aaron, you went like that. Okay, who?
I can't remember the name. We were at a Blue Jays game, and he was filming with me there, Scott Speedman. He came up and was like sat up on where we on the rail right beside us, and we chatted for a couple minutes, and then so
there you go. Interesting. There's someone else who had said that they had too. Or I thought a nod of a, yeah. Well, Cheryl, come on. Rick Mercer, right? Oh, okay. Sure, yeah. Mike. Shovel day off, okay, well, yeah. That happens. Corny. Oh, no kidding. Yeah. That's kind of neat. Is there anyone else? Well, we're kind of rolling around. What? Gwen. Oh, you met Gwen. Is that who you mean?
She met somebody.
Oh, she met someone famous. Okay.
I've met Willie Nelson 2 or 3 times.
Willie. Okay. Well, that's pretty cool. That's good. Sheldon.
I really went up. I've met Pastor Tom Baker just about every Sunday.
You know, there's a sign with my name on it in Calgary. When you kind of go around their little, it's not perimeter, but the Tom Baker Cancer Society, or Center, I should say. But it's neat when you meet someone like this. And of course, what we've kind of eliminated here, we're not talking about people that you've sort of seen at a distance. I mean, we've seen people at a distance, but people who you actually kind of encountered. Like some of the ones, when Dave Matthews, we met Dave Matthews, that was kind of neat. But one that I wanted to highlight was a few years ago, Karen and I, we went to Hawaii with my brother Bob and his wife Darlene, and on one night we were while out for dinner, Kara saw someone, it was in the evening, the sun was setting, saw someone a few tables down, and she said, you know who that looks like? That looks like, that lady over there looks like Silken Laumann. And who is Silken Laumann? Well, she's an Olympic rower. And we kind of went back and forth. Well, yeah, there she is. And we kind of went back and forth. There's a lot. Well, the three of us were kind of skeptical. Kind of like, it's probably not her. And kind of went back and forth over whether that was really her or not. And so there really was only one way to determine whether that was really Silken Laumann or not. And how are you going to do that? Well, you're going to get up and you're going to walk over there and ask the question. And everyone else was a little too afraid. And so, being the celebrity I am, I decided that I would get up and I'd go over there. And I went over there and introduced myself, and sure enough, Kara was right, it was Silken Laumann. And I should have left it at that right there. We've met each other, and that's where it should have sort of stayed, but I had to kind of go on a little bit and express my admiration for what she had accomplished through expressing or trying to recall what she actually did in the Olympics. And, but it would have been just good, just like, very nice to meet you, aloha, hakuna matata, and just kind of go on my way. But no, I'm not kind of going, yeah, you're a really accomplished athlete, da-da-da-da. And I said, what was that? Was that, and I knew it was the Summer Games. I knew it was, and I knew she was a rower, but I'd say, was that in Calgary? And this smile just stretched across her face, so gracious, and she says, no, it was in 92 in Barcelona, and then 96 in Atlanta. I competed in those games. The 88 Olympics is what you're referring to, and that was the Winter Games in Calgary. And so, okay. But she was very, very gracious. So I suppose what I did know became fairly obvious, which wasn't much. And we chatted for a little while too, and ironically, she was there with her husband and another couple, and we kind of chatted about our families for a little bit, and it turned out that her husband had attended University of Manitoba, and that was kind of neat. And I think they reside now somewhere in the Lower Mainland, I think, but obviously you can't take my word for that. So, but it is kind of neat. It's maybe even fun meeting people who are known around the world. But honestly, like even after that brief exchange, I don't know Silken Laumann, nor do I know her husband. And as great as it was to meet them, I don't know them. I really don't know them. Not like I know you people here, all of you here. And we had Paul Link up on the screen there a few moments ago, and it's possible that more than any other person around, I think I've picked on Paul more on Paul than any other person in a public setting, even funerals. And yet, even there though, I can recall 3 funerals that I picked on him on. It's like really at a funeral, and it was Ernie's funeral, Art's funeral, and Midge's funeral where I did that. But so I knew each of those dear departed ones well enough too that they would have thought that was funny. They would have laughed at that as well. And I don't just send out fun little jabs at anyone. But I know Paul, and when I have a lot of busyness going on in my life, this is interesting. I can always count on this. I can always count on Mary Ann to either come by or call to see how I'm doing. And I also know this. I know that Mary Dick she has a real servant heart too, and she's a very caring soul, and she would do nearly anything for this church. Make calls, lead a service, and it doesn't matter whether she feels confident or equipped enough to do whatever the job is. If she can help, she's going to do it, and she'll give her left arm in the process through it all. And I can always too count on her being here early on a Sunday morning, early enough that we can enjoy a cup of coffee before everyone else rolls in, which is kind of nice. And that must be kind of a family thing or a trait, because her niece Erin is quite similar too. She also has that kind of a heart, and I don't know how many different times where I've shot her a text or a call, Erin, I need a little help, or this is what I did, I need a favor, and it's just, before she even knows, it's, okay, shoot, what is it? And then there's Sheldon, like whatever he's into, he pours himself completely into it. There is nothing halfway about that fellow, and I really admire that. And I'm getting to know Blair too. And there is a guy who has got some pretty wonderful stories from his checkered past, we'll say. And if hit him up for some good storytelling, and I promise you are not going to be disappointed. And and then there's Helen too, like she's treasurer with Calc, and Calc, and this is all seriousness, this isn't a joke, Calc is so lucky to have her as their treasurer, Canadian Association of Lutheran Congregations. She's a prayerful soul too, and she and we share commonality. So, okay, let me try this here. Helen, tu pantalones son muy bien.
Oh, gracias, señor.
We are Spanish comrades if there ever were some. And Lucy, we will always have Southside Edmonton Highway to Petro-Can, right? And then there's my darling little wife here, and I know her, and she is a musician in every sense of the word, artistic, and I'm not a musician. And I like a certain kind, I like various kinds of music, but there is a specific kind of music that she does not like. And she can't see, I can't see, she doesn't see how I can have any of this music on my phone or any of this, whatever it is. And she has even sung a few lines from a few songs before, and it was just like Steven Tyler from Aerosmith was right in my living room. It was just like that. And that doesn't, okay. Tim's laughing, he gets it, he knows where I'm going. And I think Sheldon and Brent probably do too, maybe even young Brent, I don't know, maybe you should know. But anyway, we'll carry on. But I do know this, there's a certain kind of 80s music, various artists from the 80s. When I put it on, she isn't even going to be aware of this, or maybe she is, but it makes her feet shuffle. When she comes into the kitchen, Huey Lewis and the News, Mike and the Mechanics, there's a certain 80s genre that she really likes, and you know what, she knows me all too well too. But it's very good that I'm the one who's kind of holds the floor here more often than not, because she knows me too well. And I could go on and on and on, and I would love to, as I look out at you all, because there is, and I see the Vincents and the long history that we have had. He actually married us, and of course that proceeds even further to when I was really young, maybe even pre-teen, and I could go on, but you know what? We're in church, right? And I have to preach something scripturally based, don't I? But I think that I am. I know that I can't just go on saying how much I love each of you, even Paul, but but I am saying something seriously, though. I am saying something of truth. And something that I believe is of utmost importance, and it would be this, is that relationships are of utmost importance. And may I suggest this too, that as much as we will all invest into the relationships that are near and dear to us, may we also invest as much into our relationship with the Almighty, because God wants to be on that list of relationships that are near and dear to us. It is of utmost importance to God to be in relationship with you and with I. Now, very briefly, I'm going to touch on 3 of our lectionary readings from this morning, beginning with Moses, and then Jesus with Peter, James, and John, and then finishing off with Peter and 2 Peter. Now, so beginning in Exodus chapter 24, we have Moses in front of us here, and he's invited up Mount Sinai to be with the Lord for 40 days and for 40 nights. And now during this excursion is when Moses received the tablets that had the 10 Commandments written on them. And there is a lot of significant things to unpack that hold so much theological substance here. But for now, let's just look at this. Moses began his mountain experience by spending 6 days in a divine cloud, and on the 7th day, he came out of it. And for Moses, the 7th day marked a new beginning. And neither he nor Israel would ever be the same because of that time that he had in the cloud. They would never be the same again. And then Moses returns back into the cloud for another 40 days and nights. And that may have seemed like an eternity to the people that he was caring for down below. But for Moses, this was time that he desperately needed. And yes, it was going to benefit, too, the people of Israel while they were in the desert. And ultimately, too, it was going to benefit all generations that would follow thereafter, including ours. And it was a moment where the result for all of humanity who would choose to follow God would be to have healthy relationships where neighbors' lives, including family members, household members, and their belongings would be treated with respect and with kindness, and there would be no false witness against one another, again, to those who would choose to follow. And this was a way of life that was so different than any other kind of lifestyle on earth at that time. And you know what? It still is. And all of this had to do with one man's relationship being deepened by his God. And this was a time, again, that Moses desperately needed for himself as a man and as a child of God, simply needing to be in the presence of God where he would receive the compassion and the care that he personally needed, and to be prepared for all that lied ahead for him. And his life would change. It would change from this, and it would change yet again, I would say. Yet by another physical encounter with the God of heaven and earth. And you know, the Bible, I think I'm right, records more theophanies, I think, connected to Moses than any other biblical character. in a physical manifestation in that sense. And they include God's appearance to Moses in the form of a burning bush before he returned back to Egypt. Another appearance as a cloud leading Moses and Israel out from Egypt into the desert. And then later, God uses the same manifestation, a cloud by day, fire by night, during their journey toward the promised land. And it was in the form of a cloud where Moses met with God here in Exodus chapter 24. And here in chapter 24 marks yet another new beginning, a deepening of relationship between Moses and God. And it would cement a future, really, that would benefit his people, and again, all generations that would follow from that time onward. And I don't think that when Moses was spending his time with God, I don't think he ever would have perceived how all of the generations that would follow him through the millennia would benefit from his personal encounters with the Lord. But God is a master orchestrator of all relationships, and all relationships can have future implications that we can't see in the moment or even perceive how they could become something later. And so with all of this in mind, for Moses, this time with God, as much as it would benefit his own people in the world, it was his time with the Lord to grow, to learn, to simply bask in the presence of the Lord. And as much as Moses would have loved being with the Lord loved it too. So moving over to the Transfiguration in Matthew chapter 17, and that's quite a story. That's where Jesus invites Peter, James, and John to accompany him up a mountain, and where they witnessed the glory of God envelop Jesus, where he shone in this dazzling, brilliant white. And if that weren't enough, two of the most famous prophets in history, they appear, that being Moses, we hear of him again, and Elijah. And this whole scene was a massive confirmation to what Peter had earlier confessed at an earlier time in an exchange that he had with Jesus, when Jesus had asked Peter a question. Peter, who do you say that I am? And Peter's response was, you are the Christ, the Messiah. It's a confession. It's a declaration. And so the presence of the two prophets, it marks Jesus as their heir, as a prophet. And if the presence of Moses and Elijah isn't sufficient proof of Jesus' call, then God's own voice, own divine voice, settles the matter entirely, where you hear these words that came, where they heard those words. This is my beloved Son, in whom I am well pleased. Listen to him. And now the three disciples, they're really quite moved by all of this, and they're scared, like they're shaking in their sandals, kind of scared. And they really don't know how to respond other than to be on bended knees with their faces to the ground. And then Jesus does something that I think is rarely emphasized or mentioned when these passages are being preached or whether they're being taught or brought up, but it's certainly not a detail to miss. Where you see the compassion of Jesus, where he walks over to them and he puts his hand on them, is how I see it. He touches them and he says, okay, it's okay. You can get up. Don't be afraid. It's all right. And Jesus was who he always was, is who he always is. And his words to them, his treatment of them is another embodiment of compassion and healing and assurance, and it bolsters within them this courage, this confidence too, which would be really important, because as they got up and they stood together, Jesus then said, okay, it's time for us to go back down. It's time for us to go back down this mountain to the world below again. And so they descend down the mountain and they're in the world that they're returning to is still the same world. It's just what it had been previously, before they went up the mountain. Only this time, they're going back to that same thing. There's no more old-time prophets. There's no more audible divine voice. There's no more light emanating from Jesus' face. But the disciples are not returning the same. And they've been changed. And so now let's fast forward a few years to 2 Peter, with Peter. And Peter is now among many other disciples and apostles and followers of Jesus, roaming the regions, proclaiming the message of Jesus to all who would listen. And those who did listen would discover the wonder of knowing Jesus personally, as the disciples and apostles and other believers did. And in 2 Peter, some, we are told, had their doubts about Jesus. There had been these false prophets who had been through the areas there, and they had told a different version of Jesus and planted some seeds of doubt within some of the minds of the people of that time. And We don't know at all of what it all consisted of, but one was that the ascension of Jesus, that there was some question of that and of his eventual return. And this put all kinds of wondering about any kind of an afterlife at all. However, Peter and company were emphatic. Jesus was who he said he was. And how do they know that? Because they were eyewitnesses of him. They were there. Peter was there on the mountain that we just read of, where he saw the wonder with his own eyes. Moses and Elijah, light, this shining light, this divine voice. He was there. And Peter was also there too when Jesus had ascended in the book of Acts, early on in Acts. He was there. And at this point, one could say, that's all fine. But man, if I had that kind of experience as Peter, what a difference that would make for me. I would fly in my faith, and I would falter a whole lot less. Maybe not, though. Hopefully. But it's worth bearing in mind, too, that Peter still denied knowing Jesus when Jesus had been arrested, and that was after the transfiguration. And Peter also had some issues even after Jesus had ascended too. He struggled in accepting Gentiles. He needed some encouragement to love them. And Moses had his issues as well. After some of his encounters, he wasn't allowed to go into the promised land for a slip-up that he had. So a visible manifestation is not enough to say, there'll never be any hiccups ever again. If I only had my own burning bush to experience. So then a question I think I'd throw out there rhetorically would be this is, what do you think a burning bush experience actually is? How would you describe it? What would it mean to you? Because I think that you will have your own burning bush experience. Every one of us here. And probably already have without even being aware of it. I think it's a matter sometimes of how you're able to see them. And each experience, each way that God makes himself known to you or to I, is for the purpose of deepening his relationship with you. And that good work that he started within you, he is seeing it to completion. It's not like he lets off the throttle here and there. Relationships are of utmost importance to God. And let me try and explain this through something that Donna, her late husband Lou, and myself had shared this past December in closing. Now, when Lou was in his last days, Donna had arranged for the three of us to get together, and we managed to get 2 visits in. And in palliative care visits, I hope for some kind of connection to be found, some kind of commonality. And sometimes it's there and sometimes it's not. But we did find something in common. And I think maybe more than one specific thing, but there was something there I never would have guessed how a certain connection was made. How I just wouldn't have never have perceived it. In time, and through some of our conversations, it came out that their son Ben had played junior hockey in Flin Flon. And after finding out that Ben is roughly 40 years, well, I guess not roughly, he's 40, is that correct? This year he's turning 40, okay. So he's in that neighborhood of years in life here. And in thinking of that, what came to my mind was a young guy that I got to know from Fort St. John by the name of Nathan Waberski, who I figured would be about 40 years of age by now, or roughly the same age. And I had coached Nathan in bantam hockey, and I knew that Nathan also played junior hockey in Flin Flon. And so I got to thinking that I wondered, and so I inquired, and sure enough, Nathan happened to play with Ben. They played together for a few years, and not only were they teammates, but they were roommates. And very good friends with one another. Nathan and the Lashniks were well acquainted with one another, and it didn't take me too long to see something here, and God orchestrating relationships so that his love can be shared between one another and clearly seen. And I'm grateful to have met Lou, and I wish that I could have had more time with him too, but I'm glad for the time that I did have with him. There was this connection that was there, and it was awesome because I think it helped us to become comfortable with one another, maybe even endeared to one another, and allowed me to see a wonderful man in Lou and gain a glimpse into his heart and discover the wonderful created being that he was, or who he was. Now, I got to get through this here. But I find it staggering, near shuddering, to consider, and there's Nathan, I think that's Nathan Donna. He played a year or two in Europe, and that looked like him, but I wasn't entirely sure. So, but I find it shuddering to consider that roughly 23 to 25 years ago, this 14 or 15-year-old kid that I coached and had a whole lot of fun with would be the connecting point in establishing an albeit brief relationship, but wonderful still. I could hardly wait to reach Nathan and tell him this very thing, of how God had used him as a connecting point. You know, the mysterious love of God. You know, a friendship with a kid from years ago turns out to be more significant than I ever could have imagined. And it brings me back to what I said earlier, is that relationships are of utmost importance. Of utmost importance to our God. And He is a master. A maestro in orchestrating relationships which will reach through the years in ways that we don't perceive and in ways that may be unseen to us. But they have an impact still, long after from when that experience had taken place. And so may I suggest this then too, what I've described. That is a burning bush right there. A manifestation of the divine. And I think that it happens all the time. And all for the purpose of deepening our relationship with the Almighty, our friend Jesus. And also then to deepen our relationships with one another. But we will miss these burning bushes if we're unable to recognize God's divine hand or sense that He is moving among us. And so it's really important then that we cultivate and that we nurture the relationships that matter the most to us. And our relationship with the Creator has to be on the very top of that list, because it only makes all other relationships even deeper, even better than what they are now. And then courage is found to seek to keep all of our relationships pure and holy and true. And relationships, they're of the utmost importance to our God, and there is always, always a burning bush for everyone. Every day, too, I think. A fire that never goes out. So, there's always a fire. There's always a burning bush for everyone. Especially when we believe. So why don't we stand and sing, I know whom I have believed.